Early in the course, in fact, I think next week, we will discuss, no, later on in the course, in the middle of the semester, we will discuss the amazing case of Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage was a construction worker about 100 years ago. Due to an explosion, a metal pipe went through his head like so. Miraculously, he was not killed. In fact, his friends, it went through his head, ended up 100 feet away, covered with brains and blood. And Phineas Gage sat down and go, oh. And then on the way to the hospital, they stopped by a pub. Have some cider. He was not blind. He was not deaf. He was not retarded. But something else happened to him. He lost his sense of right and wrong. He lost his control. He used to be a hard-working family man. After the accident, he lost all of that. He couldn't hold a job. He couldn't stay faithful to his wife. He couldn't speak for 5 minutes without cursing. He got into fights. He got into brawls. He got drunk. He lost his control. He ended up on a circus sideshow, traveling through the country with the big steel pipe that went through his head. And this is, again, an extraordinary example of how the brain can give rise to the mind and how things that go wrong with the brain can affect you in a serious way. We'll discuss cases of multiple personality disorder, where people have more than one personality, and also discuss the debate over whether such cases are true or not, whether they can be taken as a real phenomena or a made-up phenomena, there's a matter of a lot of controversy. And then we'll even discuss some rarer cases, like Capgras syndrome. Capgras syndrome is typically, there's hundreds of cases, not many, hundreds of cases. It's typically the result of some sort of stroke. And what happens to you is very specific. You develop a particular delusion, like it's getting dark. And the delusion is that the people you love the most have been replaced. They've been replaced by aliens or robots. Thank you. By Martians, by CIA agents, by trained actors and actresses. But the idea is the people you care for the most, you believe are gone. And this could lead to tragic consequences. Capgras syndrome is associated with a very high level of violence. One man in Australia a couple of years ago was under the delusion that his father was replaced with a robot and cut off his head. A related disorder involving the very same parts of the brain is called Cotard's syndrome. And Cotard's syndrome is you believe that you're dead. You believe that you're dead. You are persuaded that you're dead. You're walking around. You know you're walking around. You know that there are people around. But you think that you're dead. And what's striking about these is these are not just sort of big screwy problems of messed up people. Rather, they're related at a pinpoint level to certain parts of your brain. And we're going to talk about the best modern theories as to why these syndromes occur. Now, the reason to be interested in them, again, is not because they're frequent. They aren't. And it's not because of some sort of gruesome, morbid curiosity. Rather, by looking at extreme cases, they can help us best understand normal life. Often by looking at extremes, it throws into sharp contrast things we naturally take for granted. The issue of psychopathy, of people who either due to brain damage or because they're born that way have no moral understanding, can help us cope with questions of free will and responsibility, of the relationship or difference between mental illness and evil. Multiple personality cases force us to address the question of what is a self. To what extent are all of us composed of multiple people? And to what extent are we a single unified person over time? Cases like Capgras are important because they tell us about how we see the world. They tell us, for instance, that there's a difference between recognizing something, in a sense that you could name it, and knowing what it is. And so by studying these abnormal cases, we can get some insight into regular life. So that's the end of the illustration of the example topics. The syllabus lists many more. I'll end by telling you that there's a lot of stuff that we'll be talking about, that I want to talk about, that I am not expert in. And fortunately, there is a community at Yale of the best scholars and teachers on the planet. And so it would be a shame for me not to use them to cover some of these issues. And so I'm going to include 4 guest lecturers. The first one is Dr. Marvin Chun, who teaches the Introduction to Psychology course in the fall and is my competition. And he's going to give an amazing lecture on cognitive neuroscience, especially the cognitive neuroscience of faces. Dr. Susan Nolan-Huxema is the world's authority on depression, and in particular on sex differences in depression. And she's going to talk about this towards the end of the course. Kelly Brownell is going to talk, is the head of the Rudd Center, focuses on obesity, eating disorders, dieting, and he'll talk about the psychology of food. And finally, Dr. Peter Salovey, Dean of Yale College, is going to come to us on Valentine's Day and tell us everything he knows about the mysteries of love. All of these details are in the syllabus, and I'll stick around and answer questions. Hope to see you next week.